Hey y'all, it's your boy Scuba Steve here. Sorry for the delay in getting a recent video up. I've had a whole lot of stuff with family and with the babies and all that. So today what I am doing is I'm working on a 2015 Chevy Silverado. This is an LS four-wheel drive with stock suspension. Okay. And I have a different set of rims and tires that I'm putting on. Those are going to be at a little bit of a later date. But today I'm going to be doing a 3-inch level on this truck. So what I'm putting on today is a FabTech. It's a 3-2 level. So it's 3 in the front, 2 in the back. And you can see it's pretty straightforward, pretty standard. Okay. So you have your front strut, your 3-inch spacers, levelers for the front. You've got your 2-inch leveling blocks in the back. That'll replace the factory. You've got your 4 U-bolts that are going to go on and replace the factory U-bolts. And you've got the parts and accessories. Okay, 2 bags of bolts, 1 bolt for each strut spacer, and the nuts and bolts for the U-joints, or the U-joints, the U-bolts. Now, what I also have, and I'll explain this to you here in a minute. Also going to be using this tool right here, which is a strut spring compressor. And here's what I'm going to be doing. Once I can get the wheel apart, I'll do an extra video for you here. But essentially, the directions when you buy these kits say you need to undo the upper ball joint, the tie rod, in order to pop loose the suspension, in order to get the strut back in with the spacer on the top. So essentially what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to get the strut out. I'm going to compress the spring, recompress the shock back down after I have the spacer installed, and that should give me enough room to be able to get the strut back in without having to take apart the suspension components. Okay, I'll follow up with you here once I get the truck in the air and get the wheels off. All right, y'all. So I've got the strut out. Okay. The strut compressor, spring compressor that I used did not work the way that I was hoping it was going to work, so I ended up taking apart the suspension components. The tie rod end, the sway bar link, and the upper ball joint had to come off. So for the tie rod end, you've got 1 screw that goes on the bottom, goes in through this knuckle. For the upper ball joint, you've got 1 screw and a retaining lock pin that goes in there that comes out of this knuckle. Now when you take the pin and the nut off, give this knuckle a couple of whacks and it'll pop right off. And then for the sway bar link, you've got a nut on the top that you need to use an open-ended wrench with, and a nut that goes through on the bottom that is for the sway bar link. Okay. The socket that I used is a 5/8 for the sway bar link, an 11/16 for the upper ball joint, and a 13/16 for the tie rod. Okay, so now that I have everything out, I'm going to get the spacer in and I'll follow back up with you. Okay, so I've got everything back together. What I'm putting on is a 3-2 leveling kit on my 2015 Silverado. You can see I got the front spacer in place on top of the strut. Now, in order to get this all in, you have to take off the tie rod link, the upper ball joint, and the sway bar link. You have to undo those components, drop down the wheel hub assembly, and then you've got 2 bolts on the bottom, 3 bolts on the top for the strut. Get the spacer in place, get the strut back in, get everything reconnected and torqued down to spec. Not a very challenging job, just time consuming. And what I can tell you is, if you're going to try to do it without taking apart the suspension components, it can be quite a process. Now, the one thing I want to mention is on the bottom of the strut, where the bolts go into place here on the bottom bushing. Once you put your spacer in place, the bushing, in order to line up, you're going to have to use a vise, or in my case, I used a hardened chisel and a pry bar in order to turn this whole bushing a little bit, either clockwise or counterclockwise, in order to get the bolts lined up. So I'm gonna get the wheel back on and I'll show you the final product. Thanks. All right, guys, now I am on to the second part of my 3-2 leveling kit for my 2015 Chevy Silverado. I'll show you what I got going on here. So in the rear, you've got the Silverado's got about 1-inch blocks underneath the leaf springs, between the axle and the leaf springs. And the new leveling kit comes with a 2-inch block. So what you need to do is you need to jack up the pumpkin, jack up the axle, and get the truck up in the air, and you're going to want to get it up in the air enough to where you're able to get the part out. Okay. And then on the bottom, you've got the shackle with the 2 U-bolts and the nuts and washers. So once you break those free and remove the shackle, the U-bolts, and the nuts and bolts, then you can pull out the factory lift block between the leaf spring and the axle. And what we're going to install is we're going to install the new 2-inch lift block. So to kind of put it in perspective, when you're looking side by side, kind of gives you an idea how much more space we're going to pick up in the rear. And the socket that you're going to need for this, sorry, I don't mean to try to see you guys get that, is a 3/16. So a 3/16 socket will remove the bolts. Once you pull the bolts off, you can take the shackle off. Once the shackle's off, you can get the U-bolts, nuts and the bolts off. And then once you have this up in the air, you get a jack. You put the jack on the leaf spring right in front, and you lower the jack down, and that will give you the space to be able to drop the new one in. So once I have the new one in, I will show you the results. Thanks. Alright, y'all, so I've got everything installed and I'm officially done with the 3-2 leveling kit on the 2015 Silverado. See where the spacer goes in there between. You can see the new hardware there for where the spacers and everything went in. Underneath the leaf springs. All set and done. Everything's torqued down nice and tight. Made a huge difference. And just from initial looks of it, definitely now looks like a lifted truck compared to stock before, and it definitely no longer has the front lean. Here comes the stock. So there you have it, guys. If you guys like my videos, please like, please share, please hit the subscribe button, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.